Democrats in disarray. That continues today. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer backtracking, throwing his support behind the Republican spending bill. Now, the far left calling for him to step down from his leadership role. Meanwhile, new polling shows that most voters hold historic unfavorable views of the party. Never been this low. Those numbers, record polling that we have found at NBC and CNN. Aishah Hasnie has more on the Hill. Aishah, good morning to you as we begin a new week there in Washington.
Bill, good morning to you as well. The weekend really didn't help cool any minds out there. For his part, Leader Schumer is still trying to defend that decision last week, although not very many of his colleagues are out there publicly coming to his defense either. I will say that Senator Chris Murphy, who is widely seen as someone who could possibly replace the Democratic leader, says that he still supports Schumer, but warned that the strategy for the Democrats has to change.
If you are a Democrat in the Senate or in the House, you have to start acting with urgency. And that is the conversation that we have to start having inside our caucus.
Meanwhile, people are talking a lot more about this. House Democrats calling for AOC to primary Schumer. And Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett went on the record on Sunday warning the leader that everyone is watching his leadership in this moment. Crockett also firing back at Senator John Fetterman over his criticism of the viral Find Your Fighter video. She shot back saying, why would anybody want to listen to someone who wears a sweatshirt short to the Capitol, doesn't own a suit? Check this out. When you talk about polling here, this is a brand new CNN poll asking, who do you think the leader of the Democratic Party is? 10%, Bill, said AOC, followed by former Vice President Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders, and the list goes on. There was really no Democrat that overwhelmingly led the pack, and that is the concern the Democrats have here on Capitol Hill. What is their message, and who is going to be the voice that leads them? A lot of questions about whether that is Leader Schumer.
Good deal. Okay,
Yep.
Aishah, thanks for watching that. Aishah Hasnie on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Dana?
Kayleigh McEnany joins us. So it must be Monday, and a good one indeed. So let's start with President Trump, though. NBC News polls on direction of the country. November of 2024, election month, that was 27% thought it was headed the right direction. Now it's 44%. It is a stunning increase in just a few months.
It's a big deal. And NBC notes that he has three numbers at an all-time high in their polling. The right direction number, his approval rating, which is at 47% in NBC, and his personal favorability. All three metrics, President Trump has hit a record high, and that right direction number is pretty hard to shift. So this is America saying, we're behind this. Yes, we're still jittery about inflation. There's some apprehension there. But I mean, when you dig down into the nuts and bolts, 56% think he's making good change on immigration. Who would have said 8 years ago that the person who's saying, I want to build the wall and deport immigrants, would have 56% approval? The country has changed, and they've changed in line with President Trump.
So on Doge, too, the NBC poll found 46 to 40%, 13% undecided. They support what's happening so far with the government.
With Doge, you said?
With Doge.
So with Doge, yes, there was this bifurcation where in principle, and we see this in almost every poll, and NBC as well, in principle, people support Doge. In practice, it's underwater by about 6-7 points. So I think that's where the PR is hugely important. Elon Musk continuing to put out the examples of hamsters in cages running and the spending he's cut and all the nonsense examples of government spending we've seen can help that in practice number come up to meet the number in principle, because a plurality support President Trump on cutting spending. We see that in the poll. It's Doge specifically.
The other thing that happened this weekend is that Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats on the Senate side, found himself as public enemy number one. Here's the Wall Street Journal Ed Board, though, saying that Chuck Schumer's finest hour, that Democrats are furious because he saved them from being responsible for a futile government shutdown. But boy, they are mad.
They are very mad. And, you have Hakeem Jeffries. How often do you see the two titular heads of the Democrat Party so at odds? And very much you see that here. There's this really interesting tension going on in the Democratic Party where broadly you see people saying, and in the NBC poll, hey, you're too critical of Trump. But when you dig down to Democratic voters specifically, to the tune of 57% in the CNN poll, 65% in NBC, they want to fight. They want to see their party fighting. So you have the base, probably the crowd that supports the biological men and women's sports, some of the anti-Israel protests. That crowd wants a fight, and that is your base. But you win that group, and you ostracize the vast majority of voters.
So I don't know how you recover from this. Trump drives so much of this. every day. It almost, to me, it feels like Democrats are always playing catch up.
Yeah.
Do you have to wait until a midterm election, more than a year and a half away, in order to catch the leader? Because the leader's doing it right now.
Well, you have people trying to do creative things, like Gavin Newsom with the podcast. It's really fascinating. He's talking to these Republican figures. You know, he's out there, but then I see data that says he's actually tanking in the polling because he's losing some of his base. So you find this tension where you need a Barack Obama, plain and simple. You need someone who can win progressives, appeal to the vast majority. You need a leader of the party. But how do you find that when you have such an entrenched base? I think Gavin Newsom's probably the best example of someone trying to do it. Whether he'll be successful, the data is really premature.
But nobody's doing the thing that would really make a difference, which is to fully break from the Bidens and say it was wrong to cover it up and say that he was capable of being president for the next 4 years.
I have my money on Gavin Newsom doing that. I really do. I would give it 6 months, but I think you'll see him make that break in the same way he did on
So history
sports.
tells us that leadership is only forged under pressure of an election. And that's when you really start to separate yourself from the rest of the party. And that election's a long way away.
Yeah.
Long
It is.
time. I mean, Barack Obama was real. Barack Obama did not meet the moment until he went up against Hillary Clinton. And that lasted 11 months.
And the data coming out of the congressional districts is not good. The data that was put before Democrats in Leesburg, Virginia at their retreats was not good. It shows they're on a perilous path, and they've got, less than a year to fix it. We're really going to be seriously talking midterms here in about a year.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Nice to start a
Thank
week
you.
with you.
So you have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Good to be here.
All right, Bill, well, there is more bad news for Democrats. Two new polls show the party's favorability plunging to an all-time low. Dean Phillips, former Democratic congressman from Minnesota, is going to join us. And he's joining us here. I thought we had a break, but we don't. Excuse me, Dean Phillips. I probably will end up with a polling rating as low as the Democrats after that screw up there. It's good to have
and
you
I lower
here.
than you, so don't worry.
I was just thinking about, just when you think you've hit rock bottom on the Democratic side, it feels like there's like another layer to go underneath. Like at this point, do you think it has bottomed out?
Well, as a Democrat, I'd sure like to think so. But Dana, as you well know, this is just the pendulum of politics. I think it was 2013 where the Republicans had even lower approval ratings, if you can imagine that, than Democrats do right now. And then they swept the elections in 2014. I think it was one of the biggest shifts in number of seats in the House in a long, long time. So this can change. And a lot of this dismay is actually Democrats upset with the Democratic Party. But I think what's really lost in all this, Dana, is the fact that Americans are pretty disappointed in both parties right now. Republican approval numbers are barely 50%. Over 50% of Americans now consider themselves independents.
Well,
and we are one of the only countries in the world that only have two parties, and I think that's one of the big issues.
NBC had the favorability of the Democratic Party at 27%. CNN had it at 29%. But the number I thought was most interesting was that NBC saying that, asking people, do you think the country is on the right track or the wrong track? November of just last year, 5 months ago, it was 27% on the right track. Today, it's 44% on the right track. So perhaps, I grant you that the Republicans aren't necessarily running away with the popularity contest award, but that is quite a turnaround, and that really has to do with President Trump winning and then implementing what people wanted to see, right?
Yeah, I think there's absolute truth to that. Americans like to see action and movement, and they like to know something's changing, especially in this age of disruption. So that's no surprise. And I think I speak for even a lot of Democrats where there are certain elements of the Trump platform that many of us support. We wish there was more transparency and respect for law and maybe a little more compassion. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of Americans are aligned about what needs to change in this country. But Dana, also, those same polls are showing that on the generic ballot, Democrats are up by 1 point in the midterm elections. So that's why
But the infighting
we are an
amongst
unusual
Democrats is
country.
interesting. People were just seeing on their screen while you were speaking, they saw you, and then they also saw a photograph of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. So no love lost between these two over the weekend, and Chuck Schumer is just taking a ton of heat from Democrats. Listen to this. This is media Democrats on Schumer. Watch.
There's an emotional need to stop Donald Trump and Elon Musk from running over this party. And I think Chuck Schumer has radically misread the room.
The reality here is there was no message, no strategy, and at the end of the day, no leadership. And this is really a black mark, I think, on Chuck Schumer.
I'm pissed. There's actually little that the Senate minority leader can say, and the 10 Democrats that voted with the Republicans can say, to appease somebody like me. I'm about to change my registration to independent.
And this just in, Chuck Schumer, who has a brand new book out about anti-Semitism, is canceling his book tour due to possible security concerns. He was supposed to get that underway, but the protests were not coming from the right. They're coming from his left. What do Democrats do about that problem?
Well, as I tweeted and I felt for a long time, it's been long overdue for generational change in the Democratic Party. Chuck Schumer has been in this position too long. I think it's time for fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. I'm actually pleased that we did not have another government shutdown. I don't think Chuck Schumer did the wrong thing. I think he communicated it poorly, and I think he blindsided Hakeem Jeffries, which is, of course, a no-no in any organization, let alone the United States Congress. So different perspectives, perhaps.
Let me just put
look,
up
at
on
the
the
end of the
board,
day,
just
Dana,
real quick. I want to ask you a quick question. If you could just put up on the board here, this is a poll asking who is the leader of the Democratic Party right now, and you can see everybody here. AOC at 10%, Nancy Pelosi at 2%, Tim Walz at 1%. You're not on this list. Would you like to be?
No, my aspirations are for the country, not for the party. I think what you just articulated about who Americans think the leader of the Democratic Party is says it all. We are rudderless, and somebody will rise. The biggest mistake we made, Dana, was not having a competitive primary in the 24 election. We failed to introduce the country to a whole bench of compelling young candidates, many of whose names are known, many not. That's why we made a grave error in judgment for a lot of reasons. But once again, we will persevere and keep the faith, everybody, but we got to work together. I'm sick of the nonsense, and I hope my party and Republicans put their better angels above anything else.
All right, Dean Phillips, go have a good Monday. Thanks for being here.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.